Hello, welcome. This is our first episode of Stories of Awakening, and we're here today with Stephanie Hoffman. And I'm very excited for her to share her story, which I know some about because she's a good friend of mine and colleague, cohort. And I'm looking forward for all of you to hear her amazing story of awakening. So as I was just meditating and preparing the space for this event, which I'm very excited about, we've had a lot of excitement coming towards this idea. A lot of people have been holding this idea in their hearts, and it's because our stories really matter. Our stories, what we really truly experience as humans on our pathways towards passion, are unique to each of us, but also they lift us all up. So hearing what each other experiences, the tough spots especially, and the unusual, mystical, magical, out-of-the-box experiences help to open our own perception neurologically about what we have the potential for experiencing and what might potentially be happening to us right now that we don't even recognize is happening to us. And it's a call to awaken, a call to become more ourselves, a call to walk towards passion in our lives. And usually that means walking towards a certain amount of fear and walking through that fear with a lot of courage. So we have this beautiful, beautiful woman here to share her story with us. And I'd love, Stephanie, for you to introduce yourself and just let us know who you are first and foremost.
Oh, who am I? I think that's one of those questions I have difficult answering on the street, but I am Stephanie Aho. I have most of my life been a muggle, but one that was trusting in a higher source. I just didn't have language for it. So now I'm a Reiki master teacher, and I live my life with spirit out loud. So I guess what I would say is I'm someone who's fearless now, but that's a pretty recent awakening.
So I'd love to take us back in time in the Wayback Machine. One of the sort of formats that Spirit's given us is this idea of let's look at the past, the present, the future. Let's figure out how Stephanie came to be in this world and what that detour was, or what that moment of awakening was that kind of shifted you on your path. Because you had a pretty dramatic shift, I think much more dramatic than most people's shifting. And so let's talk about your childhood first, and where you grew up and how you grew up and what your relationship with yourself and with nature and spirituality was.
Well, I was raised in a very influential, beautiful part of California. And I was an only child with very hardworking parents, and I was raised by live-in staff, and I was alone pretty much all the time. And I was probably the oldest one in the room around age 3, so that wasn't a problem for me. I self-entertained quite well. And then when I was around 10 years old, we moved to a farm in Oregon, in southern Oregon. And at that point, my companions were the trees and the land, and there was a horse, Goldie, that was pretty much my sibling and my only companion between the ages of 12 and 18. So I was, really one of those children that took care of myself. And I think that probably means that Spirit was taking care of me. I just didn't realize it at the time. So I lived in books. Yeah, I was one of those booky kids.
And where did you find your passion when you were a kid? When did you feel the most alive?
Freedom came for me with nature. Freedom came with me with the stories in my head. I was writing stories in my head before I could write them on paper. And I think that a part of me has always believed, I'm tearing up, so I believe it to be true. I think a part of me has always believed that if I could conceive of a story in my head, I could make it happen. Because I feel this incredible strength of will. I've always been incredibly strong and incredibly strong-willed and incredibly capable, and which is why everybody just believes everything I say, because I say it with such certainty that I can make it happen. Because I just think if I can conceive of it, I can do it.
I love that. I love touching on like what the magic was that we were aware of when we were very young, that maybe we lost touch with us somewhere along the way, or it became turned into something else. But there, for all of us, I think there's like this knowledge of our own superpower somewhere inside of there that like we secretly kind of twiddle away with. You know, I believed that I could move things with my mind. I believed I was telekinetic as a child. So I spent a lot of time like trying to move the curtains and move things in my room. And, you know, I have this strong belief that I'm telekinetic. I want to see it. I want to see it happening. Yeah. And so it's interesting to hear you say that, and to think of the ways that your creative mind was weaving realities when you were really young. I love pairing that sort of our natural talent with the circumstances of struggle. Like, what were the things that were really, really hard for you growing up, and the things that wounded you to the point of creating the container for your own healing? And maybe that healing didn't show up until later, but that circumstance, I've been thinking more and more about the circumstance in which we come into this world, right? Our tribe of origin, our family, our culture, the circumstance of our arrival here, and the way that we're able to process that into reality, right? The idea that reality for humans is a construct, you know, and maybe you moving to nature and moving to the farm and being able to engage with the trees and with nature and with Goldie was the first time that you felt something that was more real than the human construct. But all of us have this human construct, right? This fabrication of what human reality is. And I've been thinking more and more about that as the perfect storm, the perfect container for what our soul wants to learn and what our body needs in terms of healing. So I'm curious to back that up, and to hear from you what for you was the primary struggle that was wounding for you when you were a kid or when you were coming of age.
Well, you know, when you're alone, actually, let me say it this way. I was an extrovert until I went to law school. And when I went to law school and I started to surround myself with the responsibility for absolutely everyone around me and absolutely every problem around me. And then I became a lawyer, and I opened my doors to every problem that could exist or walk in my door. I came to slowly realize, and I'm a slow learner, it took me about 20 years, but I came to slowly realize that the same as you can't steal power from someone else when it's their power and do anything with it, you can't steal responsibility. And you know, that's words that you and I have talked about before. I tried to take responsibility for every single person that walked in my door for 20 years. And, you know, it broke me because it wasn't mine to take. It didn't matter how strong I was. It was the fact that it was theirs. And I was trying to take responsibility for something that wasn't mine to fix. And that was a tough lesson. It still makes me tear up now.
Where do you think you learned that sense of responsibility? Was it because you were an only child and because you were responsible for yourself?
Yeah, I think my parents also, you know, I have the perfect parents for who I am, and they are very kind and wonderful people, but they have always not known what to do with me, and I've always taken responsibility for everything that was going on around us. And two, you know, my mom would say, you're an only child. It's going to be your job to take care of us when you grow up. So get a good job, be able to support, because, you know, she lived in a fearful environment where the universe wasn't supportive of her, and so therefore it was going to be my job to be supportive of her when she couldn't do it anymore. She would take care of me in the beginning, and I would take care of her in the end. That was the deal. And I took that a little too seriously, I think.
It's a lot of pressure. It's interesting to think about how we assume responsibility. I love this relationship, and we have talked about this a lot, this relationship between power and responsibility. And that, you know, when we take other people's responsibility that's not ours, we're also taking their potential for power away from them as well. And when we don't take our responsibility that is ours, then we're taking away our potential to have power in the situation. So it's interesting how this idea that, you know, the soul comes down with this desire to learn, and the body is formed and says, I will give you these ingredients to form this body, but there's some payment we need in kind, you know, which is that my ancestors, my mother, my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, they all have baggage that has not been sorted and has not been dealt with. And you're going to need to do what you can with that, right? And so what happens to a human when at some point on the path we go from whoever we were in a more natural state as a child to holding, whatever age we were when we picked up those bags and said, this is now my responsibility to hold these bags. Or we put it on our backs, or we placed it as a bowl on our heads. Like how people interact with that sense of obligation or that sense of duty is very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about your big break, your, what Brene Brown would call your spiritual awakening / breakdown moment, because I think it's really sensational. And I relate to it in my heart. So what was the time when you turned, so you were a divorce lawyer for 20 years, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And which is a very fun thing in our community of woo-woo folk, right? To have a divorce lawyer, Reiki master. But so you were a divorce lawyer for 20 years and you had a specific moment of awakening in which you no longer practiced the law. So let's tell that story a little bit.
Well, I was sitting at my desk one day in June or July, I don't remember, it was a J month in 2012, and I was processing documents. I had negotiated a contract, and opposing counsel had drawn up the contract, and I was making sure that what we had agreed to was written down perfectly so that it was something everyone could live with. And one moment I was a lawyer, and the next moment I wasn't. I couldn't process the words. I couldn't think logically the way my brain had always thought before. In that moment, everything changed for me. And at some point, my paralegal came in and looked at me and made a call to the Oregon State Bar saying, I've got a broken lawyer. And they're like, oh, we know what to do with those. And my life has never been the same. From that moment, I used to read books voraciously. I don't read books anymore. I kind of download them in a strange way. But I used to be able to get around town with maps. Now I'm north, south, east, west only. I mean, I just completely changed from a logical left brain person to right brain and all intuitive. And it was that fast.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It reminds me of that doctor, I don't remember the TED Talk name. It was like Stroke of Insight. She was a brain doctor and she had a stroke, and she was like observing herself as she was having this left brain stroke and like going into her right side of her mind and experiencing how these different parts of our mind operate and perceive the world, right? The thing that comes up for me as you're talking, though, is this idea of a squeeze, that there was some sort of constriction happening for you for a while, most likely, that led to that pinnacle, a squeeze that you were not addressing, right? So I'm curious if you could share with us what that squeeze might have been or what that felt like, because I think a lot of people, even if they don't have that like stroke of insight moment where they're like, wow, I am no longer this, I am something else. I don't know what that is, but this is done. My body, my mind, my spirit says, no more, time out, you're done, right? I think that not everyone's moment of awakening is that big, but most of us who are walking towards a threshold like that, where we walk through and we're like, okay, now I'm rebirthing myself as this next version that is something closer to a true expression of myself as I'm coming to know myself. Usually there's some constriction and some squeeze that's happening in life for a while beforehand that leads us to that point. And being the strong-willed, strong woman that you are, I'm sure you just told that to get the F out the door, and you carried on with business until your brain was like, actually, you will no longer be able to function. So we're going to do this now. So what did that squeeze feel like?
Feel like, well, I can tell you what it looked like from the outside. Maybe I'll work my way around to how it felt. But like I said, I'm an only child of parents. So, the short version is my parents were living at the commercial building I had built so that I could have my daughter on site with nanny. My husband had changed jobs, and so I was the sole breadwinner for my husband and my daughter and my nanny and my parents, who were all living there. And my uncle came down ill. He was a bachelor up in Alaska, and I said, come, live with us, and we'll take care of you as well. And of course, I had a staff of like 4 or 5 and a caseload of 250 or so, and tenants in the building where we were. So I was just in charge of everyone. And it never occurred to me that that wasn't my job, to be in charge of all the generations. I mean, we've all done this, right? You know, you're in charge of your parents and your kids. But I kind of took it to a level where I didn't feel as though my life was my own. I think how it felt was along the lines of, it felt like life was responsibility and that I was doing what I was supposed to do. I think many of the men in our society right now think if they just go to work and earn their coin, that that's what they're supposed to do and be. And that's really an unsatisfactory life. And so I thank God that some part of me or spirit said, that's not life. And so we're going to gently set all of your responsibility down for a few months so you can feel what it's like to not have it for once in your life. And then you get to choose. And I chose to go a different way.
Mm-hmm. I'm eager to hear what that choice looked like, the direction that you did take. But I want to share this, excuse me. I want to share this image with you that I'm finding hilarious on my Interscape, which is that your life in my mind, as you're describing it up to that point, feels like my relationship with time. And this was a relationship with time that I came to understand with myself in college. A friend of mine was like, oh, different people have different perspectives of time. Some people, it's like a long hallway. Some people, it's like a round room. Some people, it's like a funnel. And I was like, okay, explain this funnel to me. And they're like, well, the funnel starts out where you have plenty of time. You have all the time in the world. There's nothing but time. And then as you go in, it gets smaller, and it's like, you know, a vantage point painting, and it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller until there's just no time at all. And so what I'm seeing for you is this kind of like open arena that got smaller and smaller, and the walls closed in more and more and more until you got to this point where there just was no choice. There was no sense of choice, which feels a lot like there's no sense of power. You know, when we don't have choice, we don't have power. And so it's no wonder life slowly squeezed you down to a point in which you had no ability to even, you know, shift your body at all. And then Spirit gave you this huge gift, which was nothingness, no responsibility for a chunk of time so that you could find a new way. And so I want to pass it on to you and to ask, obviously I think probably the way this is recording, they can't see you nodding your affirmation. So I'm not just talking out of my butt. She's agreeing with me. Just to put that out there. But if she was going, no, that's not really, I would stop. But I do want to hear, a lot of people, I feel like when they're going through, you know, sort of a healing crisis or a time of rebirthing, the modalities that they go to that are helpful to them sometimes lead the way towards what they will be doing, right? I like to say that the challenges that we have give us the raw materials to make the medicine that we then have to offer others, right? And clearly now you're a medicine maker and a healer and a teacher. And so I'm curious if Reiki had a big part to do with your healing process, or is that how you found Reiki?
Yeah, I was so incredibly blessed. What actually happened was somehow by the grace of God or Spirit, I ended up in someone's office who did acupuncture. And I realized that the movement of energy in my body was giving me immediate relief to feeling like I was over-caffeinated, just jittery, shaky as hell. And once I realized that it was energy, then again, intuitively, I got a bee in my bonnet that I wanted to take a class for Reiki for animals, because I love animals more than anything else, and they were keeping me calm. And my cats kept me alive. I swear to God, they were sucking more energy off of me than a Hoover. And I wanted to do Reiki for animals, but you know, you're not allowed to do Reiki on animals until you figure your shit out on humans first, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And so I took a Reiki for human because I wanted to get my prequel out of the way so I could take this class that for some reason I had to be in my bonnet I had to take, and it changed my life. I took to it like a duck to water, and I needed a place for that energy to go. And I've just now realized that with everything that I was doing, with all of the misdirection of my misunderstanding of what I was supposed to be doing or how to do it, I was full, painfully full, like a breast milk feeding mother, painfully full of energy that I needed to give away. But I had surrounded myself with people who wanted what I couldn't give. And I desperately needed to give for my own health and well-being and happiness and joy, something that I didn't have an outlet for. And I had more people asking me for what I've said, what I couldn't give. And it was a sad, sad existence. I'm very, very glad that I found acupuncture and absolutely overjoyed that I found Reiki. And that's why I love to teach it, because it's kind of my superpower. You know, I believe everybody's got a ninja superpower, like you were saying. And my thing is I can see it in people and I can show them their own. And now I'm not taking any responsibility. I'm not, it's not me at all. It's just, I can show a master their own mastery, and they get all excited and they go off and, drive it like it's a new car. And I thank God for that. So yeah, it was acupuncture that showed me the way, but it was Reiki that was my way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. That sort of like breadcrumbs through the forest process, right? Is that it's, we don't always know where we're being led, but, one thing kind of leads to the other. And we just need to open that door, right? We just need to like step out of that cabin and see the first breadcrumb and know that, this is the next spot. Because ultimately it's not a arrival point. It's many arrival points. It's many breadcrumbs, right? And when we're on the path of a seeker, we're on the pathway of passion, we're constantly becoming more ourselves. So we're constantly experiencing something new. And I always, the teachers in my life and the people in my life that I admire are people that really live that way. And it's a pretty courageous way to live, because it gets comfortable. When you get to a place where you're like, I'm damn good at this thing, I'm just going to stay right here. At some point that squeeze starts happening again, right? And you're like, this isn't quite right, And so it's so great that you were able to kind of like follow that pathway and be like, oh, logically, this is energy moving. And I like that. And I'm good at that. And my body understands that. Let's explore what it means to move energy. So where do you live now and how do you practice? What does that look like for you right now?
I live in the greater Portland, Oregon area. And my home, surprisingly, is in the center of a large city, which I wouldn't have expected. But, you follow those breadcrumbs and you look around and all of a sudden you've got a gorgeous life where you wouldn't have lived before, thanks to some really great people. And my practice is less than a mile from my home. I walked several times. It's a small little office where I can meet people and do energy work. And sometimes I do energy work, but I call it hypnosis, or I call it cold laser therapy, or I call it, working with essential oils, all of which I am doing. But realistically, what I'm really doing is just spending time in space with someone, being me, and allowing them to be them. And so this practice that I have created, called Fire Horse Reiki, and I've called it Fire Horse because, I'm female and I have that history of living in a society raised by older generational parents where that had a stereotype and some responsibilities to go with it that I kind of wanted to buck. And in some cultures, the year of the fire horse is the year when the women have so much power that everyone's afraid to have one because they figure she's going to burn the house down and chase away all the animals. And so birth rates are extremely low in fire horse years. They just don't have any children at all because they're afraid to have a female. And I think we need more fire horse women in the world. And frankly, more fire horse men of that same, I'm going to be me, even if it scares you, ilk. And so that's the people that I enjoy working with, and the people I enjoy training are the ones who didn't fit in and were trying to give of something that was truly them, but couldn't find the right way to give it, and have been drained by a world that only wants what they can't give. So I run my Reiki business, and it is what I am going to do until I leave this planet.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I think, going back to that, like where you have struggled, that's your medicine, to be able to identify this is who I was and this is who I became and this is why I became that, is because I didn't fit in and because people were scared of my power. And I went through that to become who I am, and this power benefits the world. And I want other people who have that same sort of story to be able to find me and to find their power and to know that their power is something that the world needs, not something to be fearful of, right? And I think it's also interesting is that horse in Chinese, but in many cultures, horse is a symbol of freedom, right? It is ultimate freedom. Our partnership as humans with horses has allowed us to move, has allowed us to explore, has allowed us powers that we would not ordinarily have. And so there is something really magical about that being. And the fundamental striving that the human heart has to be free, right? And how we're learning that, especially as women, especially as people who are marginalized of any category, of any type, to figure out, and people who aren't even not considered marginalized, I think sometimes are the most in prison to their privilege. But we're all trying to figure out what way we can discover to our own freedom. And so I think that's really, really beautiful. Thank you for sharing your gifts. So Stephanie, I know that you use a couple other modalities in your work, and you mentioned hypnosis and essential oils. Can you describe that a little bit more so people get an idea of like what you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I think is super important is that people think that energy work, because they can't see it or we haven't yet figured out how to quantify it, that it's not real. And so it's super important to me because I am still the woman who was a logical left brain attorney for 40 years, 45 years, I guess. Anyway, the previous me would have needed something to buy in. So what I do is I use different modalities together in the same hour to reverse engineer what a person's body and system is asking for. So the modalities that you've listed, and then there's a new modality out, fairly new, called Acunect, which is based on the acupuncture locations, but using energy to ask the body what needs to move out of the way for us to be our higher selves. It's not focused on what's wrong with you. It's focused on, would you like to be a little bit better? And it's a beautiful modality. That particular modality is how the body speaks to us. And then Reiki, of course, pulls energy to where the body pulls it to where it wants it to be. So the body's telling us, could I have, some energy here so that I can heal myself? All of these plant modalities, the essential oils, and hypnosis is the body choosing what it wants to heal itself. The emotions saying what we are putting into our subconscious to protect ourselves from something that maybe was perceived or something we picked up when we were young. All of my modalities are based on the fact that we're amazing and we could get out of our own way a little bit and be even amazinger. And so that's my shtick, is I get together a whole bunch of different modalities and I show people how they're all agreeing on the one thing, which is going to get them out of their own way and give them quality of life and peace and a life worth living, a joyful life, because we all deserve a joyful life, and there's no reason we shouldn't have it. Not one reason.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think it's, most of us as healing practitioners end up sort of weaving in and out of many different modalities. There's so many different modalities that are out there. And so finding the ones that really call to us. And I love that this, Acunet, I think you called it, like kind of dips back into this originating breadcrumb, right? Into acupuncture and into the meridian system, which is such an ancient medical system and so effective in so many ways. There were a couple things that popped up while you were talking. One was, for people like you in our community who started out as muggles, as you call it, or started out working in, these more corporate or more sort of mainstream jobs or positions. There's some of us who have always been on the fringes and some of us who really went into the belly of the beast, right? I think that there's something so valuable there in your ability to create a bridge with many different people along that spectrum from where you are now and where you have been. And something is clicking for me, or I'm recalling you talking about working with Reiki in a corporate setting, and sort of that, a lot of people, one of the reasons that people have a hard time sort of reaching into alternative therapies and alternative work is because they don't feel like there's empirical proof that it exists, right? And there's so much in our culture that puts down anything that isn't purely scientific. And of course, science is trying to actually catch up with where these ancient healing modalities have been for a very long time. Everything from aromatherapy being a rather new sort of scientific, we agree that actually essential oils do things, right? And that came through the scientific method, but we've been using oils and plants for hundreds and thousands of years as our partners in medicine, and acupuncture and acupressure have been used for thousands of years also to great efficacy. And we're just still trying to catch up with, like, how does the body actually work, and how is the body an actual energy being? So I just want to jump to the side for a second and talk a little bit about your work in the corporate realm, helping people to de-stress and to integrate in these really high pressure situations, and what you guys have found, because it's a pretty interesting project, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah. And, we kind of started in the hospitals. Everybody puts down the insurance companies, but they know where the money is. And, I can compare, when I was an attorney, my insurance was like $1,000 a quarter because we make mistakes. And we got to have a pool of money to make it right? But as a Reiki practitioner, my insurance is like $120 a year because Reiki can't do any harm. It never has. And so there's no damage. So these insurance companies start walking, like here in the Pacific Northwest, Northwest Reiki Association goes into the oncology clinics through Compass Oncology. And we offer Reiki to people who are receiving chemotherapy to keep them calm at the time of chemotherapy, to get rid of their nausea and to get rid of their pain issues. And so, we're quantifying all of this. And we're doing medical testing now where we've got small medical trials that are actually showing. We had one, it was 45 knee replacements. And we're doing, 1/3 of the people get no treatment. 1/3 of the people have someone coming through acting like they're doing Reiki by placing hands on the body but not actually doing anything. And then we have masters running energy through. And human touch beats hell out of absolutely nothing at all, I'll tell you that. But Reiki was giving people less medication, less pain, and they were getting out of the hospital faster. So the insurance companies were saying, show me your bottom line. So when you're talking about these corporations, going into these corporations is really a bottom line. You've got to prove your dollar situation. If people are less sick, if people are less stressed, if people are making less mistakes on the widget line, those are bottom line issues. So we go in on a contract for a short period of time, and we compare mistakes made, absentees, sickness, and recidivism rate, people who just absolutely can't handle the job. Before and after we've been there for 3 or 6 months, and we just improve their bottom line by bringing a team of people in. The way it looks like for an employee is, for nurses, sometimes we have to actually work them at their station, and they'll just say, come and work on me, my back hurts, and you just walk over and stand behind them. For other people, they just give us, a Tuesday where we have the conference room for a period of hours, and people sign up on a worksheet, and they, it's time, I get my 15 minutes, they're paid, they're on the clock, they're happy, boss is paying for it, I'm going to go in. And the numbers are incredible. So the health and bottom line of these businesses is based on the health of their employees. And health and well-being is based on pain and stress and concentration. And those are the things that make a company healthy and well. So yeah, we're enjoying our Reiki and business rollout as well.
Yeah, that's so fun. What a great gift that you're giving, and what a neat crack to fit through in the corporate world where so much, is about the money, where the money is going and how the money is operating. And it's really, really significant to show that, like, quality of life and human well-being has a lot to do with the well-being of a business, a corporation, which is built on human well-being. that was one of the things when we met I thought was so interesting, because I had worked at a nonprofit corporation for 3 years as their staff therapist. And that was the first time I ever worked in a corporate environment of any kind. I'd never had a desk job. I never, it was mystical. It was a mystical thing that I knew from like Office Space, and from like my one partner that worked in a corporation. I'd be like, tell me about these cubicles. What does that mean? Like the wall, they don't go all the way up. Like I really had no idea what people went through. And though I felt still like people working in offices were human beings, I didn't have a lot of contact to people working in offices because I'd always existed on the fringe. So it was very interesting to work as a staff therapist in a corporate environment and to develop very intimate relationships with people who were getting treatments from me, mostly body work, but also spiritual consultation and facilitation work, and to create a safe space in the heart of an organization like that, where people were getting subsidized treatment. So the boss is paying for half of it and they're paying for half of it. They're getting a darn good deal. And I'm being paid well, which is good for my quality of life and my ability to show up every day. And people are coming in and sharing these stories of how stressful it is to work in that environment. And even in a very good organization, that it's still so incredibly stressful and so annihilating in a certain sense. And to have relationships with these people ongoing and really develop a sense of like felt empathy that was really real for people all over this country and all over the world that work in these environments for much lesser, causes than people that I was working with were working for in education. And to see how much touch and compassion and Reiki and, care, how much that affected people in a positive way. It's really a wonderful thing. And I think that it's going to be something that we see more of all over the board. I think we need to. I think we need that. We need that. And, as we become more globally connected through these sort of mechanisms, this technology that we have, and let's use it for good. We're doing it right now. We're using it for good. But in this all technology that we have and the increasing bandwidth that we're expected to hold as human beings, we're expected to always have our phones on us, and we're expected to check our email many times a day. And we're expected all of these things where, again, this baggage, right? It's not just the baggage of our ancestors. This is the baggage of right now, of our society right now expects us to earn all this money, to be on top of all these different levels of communication, to be on top of social trends, to be able to know what's happening politically and be active, to be able to raise our children well, all these things. It's just like pressure upon pressure upon pressure, and how a human mind and body and energy system are able to withstand that pressure is remarkable. It is remarkable. So we need each other, and we need touch. And we need safe spaces, and we need teachers that not only do that for us, but teach us how to do that for ourselves. And I think that's, I'm also a Reiki practitioner, and I think that was something that really spoke to me during my training, was this idea that Usui, who was the originating, person who brought Reiki forward, said, he'd been working with houseless folks and people who are in leprosy camps, and he was doing healing work on them, and he was realizing he'd come back the next week and they'd be sick again. He was like, well, why isn't this sticking? And he realized that they really needed to be doing self-Reiki on themselves. They needed to be healing themselves. And so this idea that the self-Reiki protocol is something that we to nourish ourselves with, but also something to teach our clients, that there is a way, that you can fish for yourself, that you can feed yourself for a lifetime through your own skills of self-care. And again, we do really need each other as well. So I know that you're offering our audience and our community something awesome through your business. Everyone who's doing this Conversation Buddy Stories of Awakening series with me is also doing a little cross-pollination. So I'll be offering your community a special deal, and you'll be offering my community a special deal. So you've mentioned a little bit to me what you would like to offer the community. Is that something you want to talk about at all?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For me, it's about letting people experience the full kind of trial platter of the modalities and see which one sticks with them, because we all take to different things, of course. And so what I like to do, I talked about reverse engineering what your body is hungry for. What I'd like to offer which is a lot of my time, but I'm really passionate about people seeing the way that's available for them, is 50% off of an hour of my time where we actually do the 4 primary modalities. And I do I pull a card for cartomancy, as well as I do essential oils. And then we do Acunet and we do Reiki. And at the end of it, I tell you, and we process through what your body was hungry for, what's moving in your life. And you can put together really where you are in the situation with your body and your mind and your spirit. And when we work with essential oils, we're essentially asking, what's the emotional component of what your body is hungry for? And when we work with cartomancy, it's what the actual attribute of the message that, you know, energetically is around you for these types of messages that are coming through in an archetype. Your body pulls energy just to where it wants it, like a dry sponge. And of course, Acunet is based on the meridian maps of your body and what specific part of your body or your spirit or because, you know, we're talking about Asian belief systems. There's no like doctor for your mind and doctor for your body. It's one doctor. Mind and body are the same. And so part of our body carry those emotions within them. And they've figured all that out years and years ago. So try these things out, see what your body is asking for, what your spirit and soul are asking for. Then I'll do it for 50% off until I'm exhausted, because I'm just so excited to share this with everyone. And it's so darn much fun. So my regular rates are $110 an hour. So for $55, fives being numbers of change, I think you have an opinion about fives as well. I'd be happy to show someone some possible, you know, modalities that might actually open your eyes a little bit and get some good for you going on.
Wow, that's so generous of you. That's a huge, huge offer. And I think 55, when I heard that, I was like, oh, well, you might have picked 55 because it's such a great number, but it is a lot of, that's you offering your services at half price, which is pretty incredible. It's a pretty incredible gift. So I hope that some people in the greater Portland area do take you up on that, because you are, I can speak from the perspective of someone who's received your services. You're a very, very powerful practitioner, and very, you create a very safe environment that feels really nurturing. So thank you. Thank you for offering that. And I hope that people will see you up on it, and hopefully not to the point of your own exhaustion, but just to the point of your delight and joy, and that the people that you really want to meet are walking through your door.
Actually, I have to say, you know, I said it before, there's a type of energy that we're just so full of that it's a gift to give it. And if you can find that and do that for a living, then, you know, there's no such thing as work. So if people feel called, they'll come, and I will be delighted to meet them. And your tribe are amazing people. So thank you for this opportunity to do this. I'm always happy to meet a friend of Marissa's.
Oh, thank you. Well, in our tribe, we're a lot of the same people. So we have a self-defining sort of circle here, but I want to compare those two for a moment, because part of this pathway conversation that I want people to start thinking about for themselves is these like thin shelves of differentiation that we have. So, you know, in finding that passion, that path of passion, finding our own joy, let's look at these two different pictures. The picture of your law practice, where you felt like people were walking through your door and asking for something that you could not give them, right? And this picture of your Reiki practice, where people are walking through your door and it's a gift to give what you have in spades, right? You have so much of this to give. It's actually, it needs to get out of your body, right? For your own well-being.
Yes.
So I want you to just define for me for a moment what you felt people were asking for in your law practice that was what you could not give them. What was that?
They really needed me to pick them up and carry them through. And these are divorces, right? Tell me that at the end of this divorce, I'm going to have my kids. I'm going to have enough money. I'm going to have a life that I, qualify as being a good life. And that was a job where, realistically, they needed to create their new life, but they wanted me to create it for them. They wanted me to make decisions for them that would create what they thought they wanted. And frankly, it was a coming of age. Divorce is like a coming of age in our country. And it's something that when you go through it, it's because you've either decided to stand up for yourself and what's right for you, or someone else broke and you're stuck in something you didn't want. But either way, it needs to be your path. And, people were expecting me to make those decisions for them and to do everything for them and just drop them off at the end like I was a conveyor belt. Yeah. And that was not doing them any service at all.
I get this really beautiful image. Like your law practice was you carrying people off the battlefield.
Yeah.
Right? Like picking up the walking wounded and carrying them off the battlefield again and again. And then this image of the Reiki practice that's more like teaching people on the battlefield how to heal themselves and how to stand up. And then them teaching other people how to heal themselves and stand up. And so suddenly there's this wave, this like tidal wave of the wounded healing themselves, healing each other, everyone standing up. And it reminds me of that quote that, rising tides lift all boats, right? Which is, I think, where we are as a collective right now. And as transformational leaders, in which everyone in this circle, everyone in this community, but everyone certainly in this conversation series is a transformational leader in their own right. We are all responsible for rising the tide, but we're also responsible for, lifting our own boat so that others can lift theirs. Like we're all lighting each other up on the way. So I'd like to pass that back on to you and see if you have anything to say about that. How does that resonate?
The thing is, we started this by talking about who was I as a child and who did I become and that road. But I'm going to tell just a story on myself, and it's kind of dark, but when I was a teenager, I couldn't read enough about Auschwitz. I was absolutely mesmerized by how one man could stir mankind into such a hatred and could go so far in treatment of our brothers and sisters. And I became a communications major in college because I wanted to understand this communications, this cult of personality. And of course, I became a lawyer to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. I mean, all the way through it. But I remember 2 days ago, I had a student in Reiki 1, and she was a natural healer, but she didn't realize what she'd been doing. And I gave her, the structure of language and understanding of how this school looks at a natural ability so that she could cultivate it. And I told her what I've always felt since I really learned Reiki. I have this confidence. Even when I had a law degree, I thought, I have a law degree, nothing can be taken away from me. But ultimately, it could be taken away from me because I couldn't do law. I wasn't, really to be trusted at that point to take over people's lives anymore. But if I was naked in a concentration camp with nothing but people around me, I could still heal myself and others because it comes from a source outside myself. And having that ability to, when my stomach hurts or my knee hurts or my child falls down, to simply put my hand on that place on their body and bring them relief. When I have the ability to feel someone nauseous in a room full of chemotherapy patients and walk over and simply put my hand on their stomach and give them relief. My God, we are so blessed to live in these times and to once again recognize that we have the ability to bring ourselves to peace in any situation. And so I do believe that it's like we're all in a battlefield right now. Our bodies think we're being attacked every minute of the day. That's why we're so stressed. If we have the ability to calm ourselves on the battlefield, I bet if we look around, we'll realize that we're not at war with anything. And I think that's, if we could teach Reiki in the schools, I think that we really wouldn't have a lot of the problems we have today.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting too, because I think that, that's a beautiful story. And I think that, it makes me think of so many stories from Auschwitz and from the Rwandan Holocaust and from these different sort of epochs of violence and darkness on the planet that have also been these birthplaces of light on the planet. and how those two things can go together, and how we can take that as a message for right now, and what we may be perceiving as this disillusion, dissolvement of society or of our government or of the earth, all of these, real dangerous and dark times in some ways that we walk into. But this is our birthing place for that light and for that choice of how we interact with it, right? I think what's interesting about Reiki that's very different for me, I came to Reiki after I had learned shamanism and different techniques for shamanic healing. And I think the thing about Reiki that's interesting that relates to your story and the difference between Reiki and your law practice, even though you have this incredible power and this ability to move this energy that's not yours, right? That's universal through your body and into other people. What I love about Reiki is that it's non-directive. It doesn't say, there's nothing in my Reiki training. And I had a wonderful, wonderful teacher who's been doing it for many, many, many years, many decades. And there's nothing in the training that I received that said that you have to know what to do with that energy, that you trust that energy to go where it needs to go and do what it needs to do and what it can do for that person and what that person allows it to do for them, right? What they're welcoming. You're not going in there and doing surgery unless that's what the energy is doing for you, right? And so in that way, you're just taking the appropriate amount of responsibility. You're not holding responsibility that isn't yours to hold. And so it's not depleting in that way, and the way that your law practice might have been depleting, or the way for any of us, certain roles that we take on that have certain obligation feelings, like I have to know how to do all of this. I would say parenting for me is one of those things where, I would like to think I'm just a hollow reed for universal energy flowing to my family, and that it's going to do what it can do, and my children are going to be as they're going to be. And, I think when I suffer is when I feel like this, this baggage of I have to take on the full responsibility to make everyone okay in this situation. And most of us as mothers and as parents do that. And so I just want to point that out, that I think that's the mark of freedom. To be able to be free with your work is to say, this energy that I give you is not mine. This energy I give you is coming through me to you, and I trust that it has the intelligence to do what it needs to do on your behalf, and that you have the ability to welcome it or to deny it, right? And that's a beautiful thing.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we have one last moment here. We're going to just wiggle on through. I just want to hear from you the joy point. I want to hear from you what feels joyous in your heart that is currently your guiding force. And I actually have two questions. So that's one of them. What feels like joy in your heart that's leading you forward? And the second thing I think our audience is going to really want to hear is a little bit about your personal practice of how you take care of yourself. Because that self-care and that self-love is so important for all of us. It's absolutely essential. We cannot be sustained on love of others alone. We have to know how to love ourselves and care for ourselves and have our own personal practice of introspection. So I just want to hear those two things from you in closing, if you would.
Okay. Joy for me, and I have had many, many changes in my life very recently. And so I am blessed to have my own home and my own schedule around my daughters. I have a teenage daughter. But for me, joy is part of the second question, which is self-care. And that is when I wake up in the morning and I have those first sweet moments of coming back to embodiment and coming back to, the solidity of my bed, to actually think what possible amazing things better than the day before could Spirit offer us. I mean, I'm daring Spirit to show me this and better. What amazing things could I do today? What amazing miracles could I see today? What amazing people could I meet today and see them not only have a relief of pain, but have the excitement of seeing what our capabilities are. And as I enter each day joyfully, what amazing new thing could happen next? This has been, we have such a beautiful opportunity to see the beauty in life. And I've always believed that my job is to see beauty. And so my self-care is in the hardest of times, is where is the beauty in this? Because I believe that everything is of God. There's beautiful channel named Paul Selig, who wrote I Am the Word, and some beautiful messages through A Course in Miracles as well. And basically it comes down to God is in everything. And if you think I can see God in everything, but I can't see God in that one thing, then you're just looking for the negative. If you can look at that one thing and find something, some part of God even in that, then my gosh, then we are living, in heaven on earth. And that is, my self-care is always, if I feel overwhelmed, if I feel too tired, if I feel just trodden on, I find the beauty in something and I focus in on that one point of beauty until I'm strong enough to look up a little bit further. And I just keep looking up until I can't handle it. And then I'll look down a little bit. And I just look for the beauty in all things. And I always find it when I look for it. It's a mental discipline to only look for the beauty and to recognize that there are always people who are going to say, yes, but the ugly is over here. And that's their, I welcome them, their path, and that's their choice. But it is not the way for me to find joy in every day, even the stinky days, even the tough days, even the days that are hard pull. I can put my head down and I can think of the joys and the beauty. And that's really where I find my most beautiful moments and my most proud moments is when I did something and I did it with class. And that's my way.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. I think I needed to hear that today. Overwhelm is definitely something I've been grappling with recently that takes me out of my place of power. And I do believe that fundamentally our power is in our choice of perspectives and how we cultivate that internal environment, right? So this advice to focus in on beauty, even if it's just one single point of beauty, and to allow that to strengthen us so that we can grow in our outlook to seeing beauty elsewhere, is really, really, really good advice. Thank you, Stephanie, so much for sharing your heart and your story and your vulnerability and your high and low moments and your insights with us and sharing the work that you do. We are especially eternally grateful to you for kicking off this conversation series, which I hope is going to be really nourishing to folks and enjoyable to watch. And thank you. I'm going to post your information in our newsletter and also on the website. And we'll spread your information around, if you don't mind, to get people in contact with you if they want to sign up for one of your special discounted sessions. Sample platter of the lovely Stephanie Firehorse Hoffman.
Thank you so much for everything you do and all of your extra work making this happen. We love you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, bye everyone. Until next month on the 15th, we will have a new practitioner with a new message and a new story, and we can't wait to see you there. So thank you guys all for joining and for watching, and we'll see you soon.